Hello, and welcome to the biggest search for the worst cartoon that I have made thus far. Today, we are going to be looking at 5 cartoons. That's right, we're not going to be looking at just one cartoon or even 2 cartoons. No, 5 cartoons we're going to be looking at today. I have always had a fascination with rip-offs, bootlegs, off-brands, knockoffs, anything of that sort. Attempts to copy something that's more popular and just failing miserably at doing so. Rip-off video games, rip-off movies, you name it. It interests me. And as a result of my strange fascination with rip-offs of any kind, whether they be bootlegs or simple rip-offs, because you gotta remember there is a difference between the two, it has culminated with this video. Today, we are going to be looking at 5 cartoons that are all rip-offs of different Nickelodeon shows. I will refer to these set of shows as the Not Nickelodeon Collection. Original name, I know. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you all to the Not Nickelodeon Collection. Starting off, you have Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island, a kids WB cartoon that ran from 2005 to 2006 and is a ripoff of SpongeBob SquarePants. Moving on from that, you have Wild Grinders, which technically shouldn't be included here because it did air on Nicktoons, at least in the US where I live, it aired on Nicktoons, but I'm still including it anyways. This show ran from 2012 to 2015 and is a ripoff of Rocket Power. After that, you have Pixel Pinkie, an Australian cartoon from 2009 that rips off the Fairly Odd Parents. Master Raindrop, a 2008 cartoon that rips off Avatar: The Last Airbender. And finally, you have Too Loud, an animated web series from 2017 that rips off The Loud House. Now before I talk about these 5 shows and how they compare to the other cartoons I've looked at on the search for the worst cartoon, I want to give out 2 honorable mentions. The first honorable mention goes to the Schnookums and Meat Funny Cartoon Show, which is quite a name, I must say. This is a show that aired on Disney in the mid-90s, and it is apparently a ripoff of the Ren and Stimpy show. I decided to watch a couple episodes to see how it was, and yeah, I could verify that it has the same sort of like wacky slapstick style of humor that Ren and Stimpy had. But at the same time, I felt like that wasn't really enough for me to call it a ripoff. This was just simply what every cartoon in the 90s was like. I don't really see why it's this cartoon specifically that I should look at and be like, oh, it rips off Ren and Stimpy, when it's like, the 90s were probably full of these Ren and Stimpy wannabe cartoons, you know? It's a bit like how around that same time, like during the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era, there was just a ton of different video games that were trying to be like the next Sonic the Hedgehog, you know? Stuff like Bubsy and whatever. It's like every video game in the 90s, in the early 90s at least, wanted to be just like Sonic. And I guess something similar to that happened with cartoons. Every cartoon in the 90s wanted to be like Ren and Stimpy. Sonic the Hedgehog wanted to be just like Ren and Stimpy in the 90s, you know, it all comes full circle. I don't really see why I should look at this show specifically when it comes to the whole, like, it rips off Ren and Stimpy stuff. I just don't see it. That's just kind of how cartoons were in the 90s. At the same time, though, I'm pretty sure Cow and Chicken was, like, the only one of these Ren and Stimpy-esque clone cartoons that was, like, actually successful and is still fondly remembered to this day, but that's beside the point. Also, this is an anthology series, meaning in addition to the titular Schnookums and Meat shorts that are kind of similar to Ren and Stimpy, there's also 2 other shorts that have almost nothing to do with Ren and Stimpy at all, and I don't want to go the cheap route and only focus on the Schnookums and Meat shorts and not the other 2 shorts, so yeah, I'm not including this in. And it's not really that bad. It's just kind of average. There's nothing offensively awful about it. It's not search for the worst cartoon worthy. I don't know, but whatever the case may be, I'm not looking at this. I'm just briefly bringing it up here, and that's it. Our second honorable mention goes to this Canadian cartoon that I randomly stumbled upon named Rev and Roll, which I couldn't help but notice had a very heavy resemblance to Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol counts as a Nicktoon, right? F it, I'm counting it as one, I don't care. I couldn't find any information about this show online, I couldn't find where to watch it, I couldn't find anything like that, but I don't think that really matters. I mean, just look at this one image, it looks like Paw Patrol. Like, the resemblance is uncanny. Even if I was able to watch this cartoon, I'm not gonna do it simply because this is clearly something that's intended for a very young demographic. I have a strict rule on the search for the worst cartoon where I don't look at shows intended for like toddlers or anything like that, because I don't really think it's fair to do that. Stuff like Peppa Pig and Caillou are shows that like I will never cover on the search for the worst cartoon, no matter how many people ask me to cover them, because number one, I am not the target audience for these shows. Number two, I am not a parent, and I have a younger sister, but she's too old for both of these shows, so there's literally no reason for me to review these. It's not like I'm a concerned parent or older brother or anything like that. Number three, both of these shows have been talked about to death by so many other people. It's like, what could I say about Caillou that's new? What could I say about it that nobody else has already said about it, honestly? And number four, for the case of Caillou specifically, and this does tie into number three, Caillou isn't airing anymore. Why? What is the point of still complaining about Caillou in this day and age? Not only has it been done to death, but also Caillou ended in like, what, 2010, 2011, something like that? It is so stupid to like still hate on it in 2024, unless they like brought it back, but I have no idea. And even if they did bring it back, it's like, who cares? It's not like there's any kid watching it right now. Maybe back in like, I don't know, the mid 2000s, this would have been like a big thing, but like nowadays it's like, who cares? I don't know a single kid that's still watching Caillou in this day and age, man. Y'all need to get with the times, seriously. Kids nowadays don't watch Caillou. Kids nowadays, they watch stuff that is like way f***ing worse than Caillou in every single aspect, if I were to be honest.
Skibbity toilet isn't Garden of Ban.
Oh my god, my head hurts so f***ing much right now. Yeah, all of a sudden, Peppa Pig and Caillou don't seem that bad for your kids to watch now, do they? Lesser of the two evils and all that other stuff.
That's right! All the Garden of Ban monsters have turned into toilets, and it's now the Skibbity Garden of Toilets! It's Skibbity Evil Ban, yeah!
Bro, where are the Go Animate grounded videos on this? Seriously, why can't we keep up with the times and move on from Dora and Caillou and Barney and like whatever crap that like kids don't watch anymore? Let me see Sniper Wolf gets grounded, Skibbity Toilet gets in dead meat, you know, get with the times. There is not a single child that is part of Generation Alpha that watches Dora or Barney. Get with the times, please. I apologize for going off on that tangent, but it's stuff that needed to be said. I'm not going to be looking at this because number one, it's not for me. Number two, it's redundant to hate on it. Number three, I can't find it anywhere. And number four, this probably isn't even that bad. It's just mediocre as hell. I don't know. I think I've delayed the inevitable long enough. Now it is time to talk about these 5 amazing masterpiece cartoons. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be greatly appreciated. And with that said, let us dive in to the first cartoon in the Not Nickelodeon collection. Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is easily the most well-known and infamous of the 5 not Nickelodeon collection cartoons. Although the other 4 cartoons in the collection are extremely obscure, there's a very good chance that you've probably heard of Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island at some point before. I'm sure most of you have heard about how this show is a SpongeBob ripoff and whatnot, how Rob Paulsen, who provides the voice for the titular character, regrets this role and it's one of the very few roles that he regrets doing, that sort of thing. I'm sure you've heard of it before. I wanted to go into this show and come out of it thinking, hey, this wasn't as bad as everyone said it was. I really wanted to do that. I wanted to give this show a bit of a chance. Like, SpongeBob's similarities aside, I could see this being a pretty good show, and I really wanted to walk out of it thinking, hey, this wasn't as bad as people made it out to be. Unfortunately, though, that ended up not being the case. Although Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is far from the worst thing I've seen on this series, it's still not very good. For starters, let us just discuss the similarities to SpongeBob. The titular Coconut Fred is very similar to SpongeBob in that they're both very hyperactive, energetic, happy-go-lucky characters. In Coconut Fred, there are these 2 banana brothers that are like idiots, and I guess they could be the Patrick of the show. I don't know. There's also this watermelon character and this lemon sailor character that I guess could both be considered the Squidward of the show. Mainly the melon character, as he's like grumpy and he gets annoyed by Coconut Fred's antics and whatnot, very similar to how Squidward gets annoyed with SpongeBob. In addition, the main cast also includes this tiny cherry, this wild, ferocious strawberry, and this apple bully, all of which are original characters as far as I'm aware, so, you know, you gotta give credit to the show for not being 100% a ripoff of SpongeBob when it comes to the characters. You could probably say that the apple bully character is a ripoff of Flats the Flounder, but I'd say that's stretching it. I'm pretty sure like almost every cartoon in the 2000s had that one bully character in it, and Coconut Fred was no exception to this. But the thing is, though, it's not even just the characters of the show that are similar to SpongeBob. There's just certain elements from SpongeBob that are just taken and put into this show. You know how in SpongeBob they have those like weird detailed close-ups and whatever? Yeah, something like that is in this show. It actually caught me by surprise, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't think that these would be ripped off from SpongeBob. One episode involves the gang going to like this gated community that's just, it's straight up f***ing Squidsville. Like, you have the giant gate that opens up, and then like inside is this neighborhood with like houses that all look the same, and in Squidsville it's full of these characters that look like Squidward, and in this show it's characters that look like the strawberry character. It's like, it's crazy. I mean, that's really where the similarities to Squidsville ends, but still. One episode feels very similar to ARG in that they get a treasure map from a fruit cereal and they start looking for the buried treasure on the map. They try to find the X. When they find the treasure, these 3 pirates that are like part of the cereal appear and they're on a floating ship, and it's super similar to the Flying Dutchman. When I first went into this, I thought the SpongeBob similarities would just be limited to, okay, you have the main character who's hyperactive and happy-go-lucky and whatever, and then you got the grumpy character who doesn't want to take part in it at all, and then you got like the idiot best friend or friends for Coconut Fred's case, and like that's it really. But this is surprisingly more of a copycat of SpongeBob than I initially thought. At the same time though, I still wanted to be fair to this show. I wanted to look at it past the whole like SpongeBob ripoff stuff and give it a fair chance. I wanted to go out of this show thinking, okay, you know what, yeah, there are similarities to SpongeBob, but it's not bad. It's not as bad as people said it was. And as I said before, this isn't the worst cartoon I've seen on this series, but it's also far from the best one. I genuinely wanted this to be like not as bad as people made it out to be. I wanted this to be like kind of a good show, but I guess not. This isn't going to be another Problem Solvers situation where the show is actually nowhere near as bad as people made it out to be. The main character, Coconut Fred, is honestly pretty annoying, I must say. I don't want to be disrespectful to Rob Paulsen or anything like that, but his voice as this character, it can get pretty grating at times. The overly energetic, hyperactive character of Coconut Fred can get pretty annoying eventually, and the whole show in general just kind of has like an obnoxious tone to it. It didn't really affect me that much at first, but then as I kept watching more episodes, it really started to get to me a little bit. I mean, it never got to the point where it's like, I hate this show, and I think it's like one of the worst cartoons ever made, but it definitely did hinder whatever enjoyment I could have potentially had watching this show. This show only lasted 25 episodes to my knowledge, from 2005 to 2006. It aired on Kids WB. Fun fact, this show premiered on the same day as Johnny Test and Lunatics Unleashed, that weird, edgy Looney Tunes cartoon that nobody remembers. September 17th, 2005 will forever be a historical day for animation. This was the Barbenheimer of animation. This was Barbenheimer before Barbenheimer. It's so ironic to me how like Johnny Test was the only one of these three shows that was actually good, and then like eventually it became bad as the years went by. Speaking of Johnny Test, I noticed from time to time there's these whip crack sound effects in Coconut Fred, and all I could think of was Johnny Test, and that's it. It's even more funny considering the fact that like when Johnny Test started, the whip crack sounds were nowhere to be heard. It wasn't until like much later on into the show that the whip crack sounds became more present. So it turns out that Coconut Fred was the one that started the whip crack stuff and not Johnny Test. What a shocker. I only sat through 5 of the 25 episodes. It was pretty apparent by the time I got to like the 3rd episode that I was not going to watch all 25 episodes of the show. However, there is one episode that I wish to talk about specifically. Sir Not a Lot, the 3rd episode of season 2. This episode is a video game parody. You have Coconut Fred, who's dressed up as Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. The aforementioned Banana Brothers are dressed up like Mario and Luigi. The Watermelon Squidward character is dressed up as Princess Peach. And the Apple Bully character is not dressed up as Bowser, but is instead dressed up as Sephiroth. Yes, seriously. At the end of the episode, there's a Donkey Kong reference included, but that's kind of it. I really wish they went further with the video game references. At the same time though, the fact that it's only Mario and Final Fantasy VII that are parodied is honestly really f***ing funny to me, especially considering the fact that like I could just imagine like a kid watching this when this came out in like 2006, and it's like, don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy is a famous video game franchise. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most famous video games of all time, but like compared to like Mario, it's kind of niche in a way. Like any kid that watches this is gonna recognize the Mario references. Do you think any kid watching this is gonna know who the f this is supposed to be? They're gonna be confused as to why it's not Bowser or anything like that. And it actually doesn't even make sense. Like if you're gonna have this like save the princess stuff, I mean, it wouldn't really be appropriate for Final Fantasy, but like they could have at least made it Aerith or Tifa or like anything like that. I don't know. Instead of Princess Peach, they could have just made this a complete Final Fantasy episode instead of Mario and Final Fantasy VII. I guess this episode is for that one specific person out there in the world that ships Princess Peach and Sephiroth together. Sure, whatever floats your boat, I guess. The whole episode just feels like a really weird Mario Final Fantasy VII crossover fan fiction that someone wrote. It would honestly be less bizarre if there were other video games referenced alongside Mario and Final Fantasy VII. Stuff like Sonic and The Legend of Zelda and whatever, Pac-Man, you know, getting referenced. That would be like it would feel less weird, less bizarre, but at the same time, it's kind of perfect the way that it is. Just these two video games, the only video games that exist, Super Mario Bros. And Final Fantasy VII. It's crazy. The fact that the episode is named Sir Not a Lot, just, it makes it even better. It's just the cherry on top, if you will. Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is, again, I think I've said this a lot, but it's not the worst cartoon I have ever seen. I could actually see this being a good cartoon, which is something that I very rarely say about the cartoons that I look at on this series. And there's a very high chance that this is the only cartoon in the not Nickelodeon collection that I can say this about. But there are things that I do like about this show. I really like the art style it has. It has a very colorful, charming art style. I think the reason why I wanted to go into this and think it's like better than people made it out to be is because of how much I adore the art style of the show. Honestly, the only real issue that I have with this show is it's just kind of obnoxious at times. The character of Coconut Fred can be a little too hyperactive, and yeah, it could be obnoxious at times. It never gets to a point where, like, I really hate the show or anything like that, but I could definitely see how it could be grating for some people. Aside from that, though, I don't really have much of a problem with the show. I don't even have a problem with the SpongeBob similarities, because I kind of find them funny in a way with how blatant it is. It would be one thing if it was just the character tropes are similar, but you got like super specific stuff from SpongeBob, like the detailed close-ups and the gated community from Squidsville that are just ripped off, and it's like, it's funny to me. I can't really get angry at it. It's funny to me how blatant of a ripoff this show is of SpongeBob. This is not me saying that this is a funny bad cartoon. This is just me making an observation. I just find this to be a mostly mediocre but still kind of obnoxious, not very good show. I guess, yeah, it's not as bad as other cartoon YouTubers make it out to be. It's watchable. For what it's worth, there is a very high chance that this will end up being the least bad of the 5 not Nicktoons that I'm going to be looking at, so just keep that in mind as we go on, that this is likely the peak of the collection. Just keep that in mind. Oh yeah, one more thing before we move on to the next cartoon. Fun fact, contrary to popular belief, Rob Paulson, who, as I said before, provided the voice of Coconut Fred, does not actually regret voicing Coconut Fred or Bubsy, which is another role that he's infamous for, and that many people claim he regrets that role as well. It turns out that's not the case. He does not regret doing these two roles at all. He goes into detail about it in a 2019 Q&A, which I'm going to play a clip for right now. I'll leave the full Q&A in the description below for you to see, but it's at the very end of the Q&A.
I think he has a new game.
And the reason I'm not involved is not because I don't want to be. They hired somebody else. I got nothing against Bubsy. Thank your press.
So, at the very least, not worse than Coconut Fred, right?
No. And I didn't have any problem with Coconut Fred either. Coconut Fred, by the admission of the producers, was nothing short of their version of SpongeBob. Coconut Fred. So instead of having a talking sponge that lives in the water, we got a talking coconut who, you know, whatever. But it was great. I love my job. Are some shows more fun than others? Yes. But, dude, if anyone on the internet too, if any of you ever see me or any actor complaining about getting a nice paycheck for doing something, we go, smack them.
I was actually quite surprised by this, I'm not even gonna lie. I was originally going to include a segment talking about how he regrets this role and he regrets voicing Bubsy in that failed pilot, but it turns out no, he doesn't regret doing either role, which I thought was an interesting thing to bring up in this video, so we could just debunk that. If there's anyone watching this that still thinks Rob Paulsen regrets voicing Coconut Fred, then, well, that's not true anymore. You heard it from the man himself. So anyways, with all of that said, allow me to move on to the next cartoon in the Not Nickelodeon collection. When the time came for me to move on from Coconut Fred onto Wild Grinders, I knew there were several things that I had to take note of. One of those things being the way that both shows rip off their respective Nicktoon. Coconut Fred is a ripoff of SpongeBob SquarePants in several different aspects. Both shows have completely different premises, aside from the fact that they both share a tropical theme. However, there are specific character tropes that are taken from SpongeBob, as well as episode ideas and whatnot, specific things from SpongeBob that are taken and put into Coconut Fred. Wild Grinders is a ripoff of Rocket Power. However, the only thing that really makes it a ripoff is its premise. Both shows revolve around kids who are into extreme sports and whatever, skateboarding and whatever, pulling off tricks, anything of that sort. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and admit that I never really watched Rocket Power all that much when I was a kid. I don't even know if I actually watched it at all when I was a kid. I have like almost zero memories of it at all. From what little I remember about the show, it was a cartoon that was very much of its time. This show ran from 1999 to 2004, and I feel like only in that time period could the show have been made. And so when you get a ripoff of the show that ran from 2012 to 2015, yeah, it's going to feel a lot more awkward in comparison. But here's the thing that makes Wild Grinders different from Coconut Fred. Well, okay, there's a lot of things that make them different, but here's one thing that makes them different. I never really had a problem with the SpongeBob similarities that are present in Coconut Fred. To me, it was just kind of funny how blatant of a ripoff it was of SpongeBob. It was not something that, like, I got angry over, but I could see why people criticize Coconut Fred for being a SpongeBob ripoff, especially since SpongeBob is a famous, beloved cartoon that everyone knows and loves. In contrast, I don't think there's anyone out there that's going to criticize Wild Grinders for being a Rocket Power ripoff, because I don't think there's anyone out there that cares about Rocket Power that much. When it comes to the 5 cartoons that are being ripped off in this video, you have a show that's complete garbage, a show that not a lot of people really care about all that much, and 3 classics, and that's it. I mean, granted, 3 out of 5 is basically over half of the shows, but still. Now, despite the many differences between Coconut Fred and Wild Grinders, there's one thing that the two shows have in common. The main problem that I have with both shows have nothing to do with the fact that they are ripoffs of their respective Nicktoons. With Coconut Fred, my main issue with it was not that it was a SpongeBob ripoff, but rather it was just because of its kind of obnoxious, annoying tone, and that's it. Likewise, my main issue with Wild Grinders is not, oh, it rips off Rocket Power. No, my main issue with it is that it's honestly a dull cartoon. Again, this isn't the worst cartoon I've ever seen on this series, but I'd be lying if I said that this was anything to, like, write home about at all. This is just a really dull, unremarkable show. There's nothing offensively bad in it. I mean, okay, there are rare instances where it could be offensively bad, but that's it. But watching through the show, all I could think of was, can I go back to watching Coconut Fred again? That was honestly a much better show than this. First things first, let us take a moment to acknowledge the art style of the show. Now, some of you could look at these screenshots and think that this show looks weirdly familiar. And the reason for that is because this show shares a very similar art style to The Nut Shack, which was a cartoon that I previously looked at on the Search for the Worst Cartoon, and as a matter of fact, it currently stands as the best cartoon I have looked at on the Search for the Worst Cartoon. In addition to that, I did bring up Wild Grinders in the Nut Shack Search for the Worst Cartoon that I made. I didn't know the name of the show at the time, but now, here you go, now I know the show, and yeah, I can confirm this is definitely something that should be on the Search for the Worst Cartoon. For some reason, when I went into Wild Grinders, my initial thought process was, okay, this show looks like The Nut Shack. The Nut Shack was a funny bad cartoon, so maybe this could be a funny bad cartoon as well. Yeah, no, that ended up not being the case at all. I would actually say that this show is arguably worse looking than The Nut Shack, even though they have extremely similar art styles. The Nut Shack came out in 2007, whereas Wild Grinders came out in 2012. I feel like this kind of art style is fitting for a trashy, edgy adult cartoon from the late 2000s, but it doesn't really feel the same. It doesn't really feel as fitting for a cartoon from the early 2010s that's intended for kids, if that makes sense. As stated before, this show ran from 2012 to 2015. This is easily the longest lasting of the 5 not Nickelodeon collection cartoons, and it also has the most episodes as well as a result of this. Naturally, I was not going to sit down and watch all 101 episodes of the show. I only watched like a small handful of them. And unless there's a standout masterpiece episode hidden within this show's library, akin to Sir Nut-A-Lot from Coconut Fred, I think this show is worse than Coconut Fred, honestly. It's just a really dull show. Kind of what you would expect from this like low budget cartoon from around this time. I guess in the same way Rocket Power was emblematic of the late 90s and early 2000s, this show was emblematic of the early 2010s. Just these like cheaply made, low-budget flash cartoons that would fall into obscurity not long after its release. As I said in the beginning of this video, this technically shouldn't be part of the not Nickelodeon collection because this show actually did air on Nicktoons in the US at least. I'm not sure if it aired like elsewhere in other parts of the world. Most likely it did. Most likely in the US it aired on Nicktoons, but in other parts of the world it aired on like some other different channel. I don't know. But I still think it deserves to be in here despite this. Perhaps if this aired on the main Nickelodeon network and not on Nicktoons, then I would say like it doesn't count at all, and this would likely be like its own separate Search for the Worst Cartoon instead of being part of the not Nickelodeon collection. But the fact that it's on the less popular channel, I think that makes it kind of more deserving of being here, if that makes sense. So the show is apparently loosely based on the childhood of series creator Rob Dyrdek, who also happened to be a former professional skateboarder, which only makes me question even more if I should consider this a Rocket Power ripoff or not. That's another thing to take in as well. With the exception of Rocket Power, the 5 Nicktoons that are being ripped off in this video, they're all like popular, famous shows, you know? SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, and Avatar The Last Airbender are all considered beloved classics. Everyone knows them, everyone loves them, and even though The Loud House is garbage, I unfortunately cannot deny that it is a very popular show. Nobody cares about Rocket Power all that much, so like it wouldn't really make sense for them to rip off this show that nobody cares about. You would think like, you know, if you're gonna rip off a show that's famous, rip off a show that everyone knows and loves. If this show came out around like the early to mid 2000s, like closer to when Rocket Power was airing, then yeah, I would probably call this a blatant rip off just like that. But this came out in 2012. Who the cared about Rocket Power in 2012? I think the best way to describe Wild Grinders is it's an unintentional ripoff of Rocket Power. I look at Coconut Fred and I think, yeah, for sure the people behind this were trying to copy SpongeBob. I look at Pixel Pinkie and I think, yeah, for sure the people behind this were trying to copy the Fairly Odd Parents. I look at this and I think, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of similarities to Rocket Power, but it feels more like a coincidence than anything else. Are there a lot of similarities between Wild Grinders and Rocket Power? Yeah, there are. Is it fair for me to call Wild Grinders a ripoff of Rocket Power? Sure, I guess. Maybe. But was it intentional? Were they intentionally trying to rip off Rocket Power? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case at all. I think this is the only one of the 5 cartoons that's going to be reviewed in this video that isn't intentionally trying to be a ripoff of the Nicktoon that I'm claiming it to be a ripoff of. It feels more like a coincidence than anything else, honestly. This is not me saying that Wild Grinders is a good show, because in all honesty, it's not a good show. I mean, it's not awful either, but it's also, like, just kind of bland and uninteresting. I don't really have a lot to say about, like, the plots of the episodes or the characters. Well, okay, there's one character that I want to briefly talk about. So, included in this cast of skateboarders is this emo kid named Emo Chris. No, I am not joking. That is his actual name, and his whole thing is just saying edgy emo stuff. Typical. It is the cringiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I guess it's included as like a satire of how emos are overly sensitive or something like that. I don't know, but it's not funny, like, at all. It also feels kind of outdated considering the fact that the show again ran from 2012 to 2015, and I feel like around that time the emo subculture was like nowhere near as big as it was. I think like the peak of emo was like in the mid 2000s, between 2004 to 2007, no later than 2008. So like by the time this show came around, you know, making fun of emos was like kind of outdated, you know? What was the point in doing it? Something interesting that I found out about while doing research on the show was that the Wild Grinders brand is actually much older than I thought it was. The show came out in April of 2012, however, the Wild Grinders brand actually predates that. I've managed to find a YouTube channel for the show, and I looked and I saw the oldest video that was uploaded onto that channel. It was uploaded in November of 2009. Apparently, Wild Grinders actually started off as a toy line, as well as a series of shorts. I did check, and I could find a lot of these figurines online. I could find, you know, listings for them on eBay and whatever. It's crazy. I had no idea this started off as a toy line, and then it became a cartoon. I found a video from August of 2011, which, again, predates the April 2012 release date for the show, and it's like, apparently during that time there was a Taco Bell like promotional tie-in thing where they would sell toys for this show before it became a show. Also, I just want to acknowledge how scary this mascot for Lil Rob, the main character of the show, is. Jesus, man. Apparently at some point in 2015, which was after the show came out, there was a mobile game that was made. However, this mobile game is now lost media. I've managed to find a couple videos for it on YouTube, including a trailer uploaded onto the Wild Grinders YouTube channel. But when I look for the game on the App Store, all I get are dating apps for some reason. I don't know. So then I became even more interested in this show than I was before. The stuff surrounding this show, the behind the scenes stuff, honestly is more interesting to me than the actual show itself. There's very little to say about the Wild Grinders show itself. It's just really bland and uninteresting. There's nothing offensively bad about it, except for the emo character, of course, but that's about it, really. I still feel like Coconut Fred is the better cartoon because it's much higher quality, and also because, you know, there's a lot more stuff for me to say about it when compared to this. But still, this is far from the worst thing I've ever seen on this series. So there you have it, folks. Wild Grinders, one of the cartoons ever made. This was a show that I'm pretty sure I might have watched this when I was a kid at some point, because I do have extremely vague memories of watching this on Nicktoons, but I don't know. Maybe I would see like commercials for the show, but like I never actually watched the show itself. I don't know. But I do have vague childhood memories relating to this show. I don't know if it's from me actually watching the show or if it's from me seeing commercials for the show, but regardless, I have some form of childhood nostalgia for the show, if you can even classify it as nostalgia. This is the only one of the 5 not Nicktoons where I can say that for. This is the only one that I have any sort of attachment to, that like this is the only one that like I watched when I was a kid. I'm genuinely surprised that it lasted as long as it did. I mean, it didn't last that long. It ran from 2012 to 2015, which all things considered is a pretty decent run. I would have thought this would be like an extremely short-lived cartoon, but considering the fact that this is a pretty bad, very obscure cartoon, I'm surprised it had a decent run, all things considered. Ran from 2012 to 2015 with 101 total episodes. That's pretty good, all things considered. And with all of that said, I think it's time to say goodbye to the Wild Grinders and move on to the next cartoon in the Not Nickelodeon collection. The downfall of the Fairly Odd Parents is something that I feel like should be talked about more, because I don't think there is any other cartoon that has went through seasonal rot as badly as the Fairly Odd Parents. Like, you look at something like The Simpsons for comparison, it's just, oh, the modern episodes aren't as high quality as the older episodes, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just as simple as that. And then with the Fairly Odd Parents, it's like it started off good, and then as time went on, there was just all kinds of shit getting thrown at it, and it just seemingly never ends at all. You have the first 5 seasons, which are all great. There's like just banger after banger in the first 5 seasons. Only on rare occasions do you get like a bad episode. And then everything changed in 2008 with season 6 when they introduced Poof into the show. Now, to be fair, the show didn't immediately become bad when Poof was added in. I guess seasons 6 and 7 are okay, but there is a very noticeable downgrade when you compare them to the first 5 seasons. And then later on they add Sparky into it, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is when the show is becoming bad now. Can we end it, please? Can we put the show out of its misery? And then for the show's 10th and final season, they add another new character, Chloe, into it. And by that point, it's just like, please, leave it alone. Just end it already. End the Fairly Odd Parents already. And then they changed the theme song, which is a crime against humanity. And then like midway into the 10th season, because of budget issues, they had to change the show into Flash animation, and it looks really off. And then the show just abruptly gets cancelled in 2017, just like that. It just disappears without a trace. You would think a show as big, as long-running as the Fairly Odd Parents, you would think it would get like a big finale, but no, it just ends abruptly. It just gets cancelled, and that's it. Just like that. The Fairly Odd Parents just disappeared, and we somehow never noticed it. It gets even crazier when you realize there were several perfect opportunities to end the show. They could have ended it with Channel Chasers. They could have ended it with Wishology. They could have ended it with Jimmy Timmy Power Hour 3. They had so many opportunities to end it, and they just decide, nah, we're not gonna end the show. And then randomly one day in early 2017, it's just, yep, the show's gone. It's over. It's dead. It doesn't even end with like a big finale. The final episode is probably just a normal, ordinary episode. The most underwhelming thing ever for such a legendary classic show. And then, as if that wasn't enough, throughout the show's run, we would receive not one, not two, but f***ing 3 live-action movies. I don't know a single human being out there that was asking for 3 live-action Fairly Odd Parents movies that starred one of the girls from Victorious and Drake Bell of Drake and Josh fame, who also just so happens to be a not very good person, let's put it that way. You know, just to add a little, just to make things even better, I'd say. And then at some point in 2022, they made another live-action version of the show. This time, it's a short-lived sitcom based on the Fairly Odd Parents. That's supposed to be like a sequel or something, I don't know. It comes out, it gets negative reviews, it's immediately forgotten about. I couldn't find any news at all of the show being canceled. I couldn't find like an official announcement, but it's been over 2 years, I'm pretty sure, since this came out, and it got removed off of Paramount Plus, and like Nickelodeon is not advertising it anymore, so I think it's safe to say the show has been canceled. It's just dead, just like that, gone. There's like no way to watch it at all. You want to watch Fairly Odder, you gotta sail the 7th season in order to watch it. It's just as simple as that. And then apparently they're just making another version of the Fairly Odd Parents, this time a Netflix cartoon, which, I mean, okay, maybe that's a little bit better than doing it in live action, but still, it's like, nobody wants a new version of the Fairly Odd Parents. Just please leave this franchise alone. It's been bad for far longer than it's been good. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Butch Hartman, the creator of the show and the creator of Danny Phantom, 2 of the most beloved Nicktoons, turns out he's not a very good fellow. What are the odds? It turns out that Butch Hartman cannot draw for shit, and that the iconic thick outline, sharp edges art style that Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom have, it's from someone else entirely, Steven Silver. He also said some stupid shit about how, like, religion can cure autism or something like that. I don't know. Just plain tomfoolery all around. Just plain stupidity, just like that. The downfall of the Fairly Odd Parents is something that just deeply fascinates me. It just every couple of years there's like a new train wreck relating to this show. You look at any other show that went through seasonal rot and it's just a lot more simplistic. It's just, oh, the Simpsons was good back then, but now it's not good anymore. Family Guy was good back then, but now it's not good anymore. Simple as that. And then with the Fairly Odd Parents, it's just a storm, a never-ending storm of garbage. And yet, somehow, despite everything that I just brought up, none of the things that I brought up come close to being as bad as Pixel Pinkie. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I might have lost my mind right now. I knew that making one giant video covering numerous different cartoons would be an awful idea, but I had no idea it would be this awful of an idea. Pixel Pinkie is an Australian cartoon that ran from 2009 to 2012. It ran for only 2 seasons and had 52 episodes in total. The show follows a girl named Nina. Nina had recently moved to a new town with her parents. Her mom, that's just a character. There's literally nothing to say about her at all except that she has Bart Simpson hair and that's it. And her dad, which is like this like hippie sort of character. I don't know why. I'm 99% sure Nina is adopted because like I just don't see, these 3 feel like they're from completely different families. I don't know though. I'm not gonna go and question the logic of this show. Thank you very much. On the first day of school, she sees a bunch of kids that all have phones except for her. There's these 3 like bully characters that they're like supposed to be like spoiled rich girls or something, I don't know. One of them is just straight up Buttercup from the Powerpuff Girls, so you know what, there's another cartoon that's ripped off in addition to Fairly Odd Parents. And so Nina decides to go and buy a phone for herself. As it turns out though, the phone that she buys devises a magic phone that has a genie inside of it named Pixel Pinkie, who happens to have some of the worst voice acting I have ever heard in any cartoon ever. Like, imagine just having to hear this voice for all 52 episodes. Mother of God.
You remembered my birthday, guys! I've been waiting for a birthday party ever since forever. Wow, Nina, thanks for all this cool stuff. So, what are we going to do for the other 23 and a half hours?
So Pixel Pinkie is a genie that lives inside Nina's phone. She's basically Cosmo and Wanda, in case that wasn't obvious enough already. Whenever Nina wishes for something, Pixel Pinkie tries to grant it, but it ends up causing more trouble than good. And so it's up to Nina and her friend Annie to try and stop whatever problem is in these episodes. It's just Fairly Odd Parents if it was bad, okay? I could make a joke about how, like, the post-poof episodes are basically Fairly Odd Parents if it was bad, but, like, trust me when I say, like, I don't care how bad they are. There's no way the Sparky or Chloe episodes are worse than this. I'm just gonna put that right there. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. In addition to being a ripoff of the Fairly Odd Parents, I can't help but notice that this show kind of bears a resemblance to Johnny Test as well. Which, I mean, Johnny Test aired on Nickelodeon in some parts of the world, so you know what? It counts. I don't care. This might arguably be the most blatant of the 5 not Nickelodeon collection cartoons. Like, somehow Coconut Fred feels less blatant than this. In the same way Timmy has to keep Cosmo and Wanda a secret from everyone, including his parents, Nina has to keep Pixel Pinkie a secret from everyone, including her parents. It's the same damn thing. There's a few episodes of the show where one of the bully girls, the one that looks like Buttercup, it tries to find Pixel Pinkie. Like, she tries to catch Nina with Pixel Pinkie to prove that she exists, and she's basically the Mr. Crocker of the show. She tries showing the other 2 bully girls that Pixel Pinkie exists, however, every single time there's something that comes up that thwarts her plans, and yeah, she's Mr. Crocker. Literally the exact same character. I have no idea why they decided to make her the Mr. Crocker ripoff. I'm not sure why they didn't just create, like, a new character to take on the Mr. Crocker role. I don't know why they decided one of the bully characters, especially the one that looks like Buttercup. I guess they decided, nah, let's not rip off one character. Let's rip off 2 characters at the same time. Why the hell not? There's an episode where Nina breaks her phone case and she tries to get a different phone case, and every time she changes the case, it ends up changing Pixel Pinkie as well, which is, I guess that's an okay idea. I don't know. It's one of the very few original ideas that's in this show, so, you know, I'll give it credit for that. Annie decides to give Nina her phone case to put onto her phone, and by putting it on, it completely changes Pixel Pinkie. She's now black and white and a lot more boring and serious, and it's just the Pixies. Like, it's just straight up the Pixies. There's a musician that Nina and Annie fangirl over in a couple episodes named Coolest Luke, who I'm just gonna say, boy, you will never be Chip Skylark, okay? You will never be as iconic as Chip Skylark. You could never create a banger like My Shiny Teeth and Me. I'm just gonna say that right there. And then there are entire episode plots just lifted from the Fairly Odd Parents with no shame at all. There's an episode of the Fairly Odd Parents where Timmy and his fairy godparents, they swap places. Timmy is the fairy, while Cosmo and Wanda are normal kids. And then there's an episode of Pixel Pinkie where Nina and Pixel Pinkie swap places. Nina is the genie and Pixel Pinkie is the normal girl. There are not 1 but 2 episodes dedicated to Nina cloning herself. In the first episode, Pixel Pinkie clones herself to be like Nina so that she could babysit 2 kids, while the real Nina and Annie go to a party. And in the second episode, Nina wishes for there to be 3 clones of her so that she could be able to do 4 different things at once after school. I swear, I don't remember 100%, but I swear there's an episode of The Fairly Odd Parents that's like that, where it's like Timmy just clones himself to do a bunch of different things at once. I don't remember if it was like pre-poof or post-poof. I think it was pre-poof, but I don't know. Maybe it could have been from the Oh Yeah cartoon era, but like, I don't know. For sure, there was an episode of The Fairly Odd Parents where Timmy clones himself, and it's like, this is the same thing as that. There are probably a lot more similarities between the 2 shows, but I cannot stand to sit through another episode of Pixel Pinkie. I'm sorry. I spent a lot more time watching this show when compared to both Coconut Fred and Wild Grinders. And the reason for that is because I am astonished by this show. I am astonished by how fucking awful it is. Usually whenever I watch a cartoon that's offensively bad, it's like I try and watch as much of it as I can, and then like eventually when it gets too much for me, I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm not watching any more of this, no thank you. And then sometimes though, you get cartoons that are so fucking bad, I just cannot help but just keep watching it, more and more of it, just keep consuming the garbage, because I'm just dumbfounded by how garbage it is. After sitting through 2 cartoons that are not good, but not that terrible either, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that Pixel Pinkie is one of the worst cartoons I have ever seen. In fact, I don't know if it's fair for me to put it down here, but I think this is the worst cartoon I've ever seen. This is actually just vile. It's wretched. There's something about this show that's just so ugh about it, you know? I think a big part of it just comes from me watching so much of it because I was just fascinated with how awful it was. And keep in mind, there are 52 episodes of this thing. I must have sat through at least like maybe 15 episodes, 20 episodes, I don't know. But I have sat through a good chunk of Pixel Pinkie. I have watched more Pixel Pinkie than I probably needed to. I was originally probably only gonna watch like maybe 5, 6 episodes, maybe like no more than 8 or 10. I ended up watching like a lot of episodes of this thing because I was so amazed at how garbage it is. I've already brought up how awful the voice acting for the titular character is, but the voice acting in general is so bad. I'm not trying to be like rude or whatever because I know this is an Australian cartoon, but like still, that's not really much of an excuse. Sometimes I think about like the shows that I've reviewed, I look at like the really bad ones in particular, and then it's like, I think the worst thing a show can do is annoy me. And that's what Pixel Pinkie did. The voice acting is awful. Nina's voice is awful. The bully girls' voices are awful. It's awful all around. It's an assault on your ears.
Look, Nina's leaving with that cool pink-haired girl. That's the guitarist. Hello? Nina, I can't dance if there's no music. Nina! Quick, they're getting away.
I seem to notice there's a recurring trend going on with the Not Nickelodeon collection, in that my main issue with these cartoons are not the fact that they're ripping off the respective Nicktoons that I'm claiming them to be a ripoff of, but rather, it's just, there's other qualities that they have besides the fact that they're ripoffs. My main issue with Coconut Fred is not that it's a SpongeBob ripoff. My main issue with it is that it's just kind of annoying and obnoxious, although it's nowhere near as bad as Pixel Pinkie. My main issue with Wild Grinders is not that it's a ripoff of Rocket Power. In fact, I don't think there's anyone out there that cares about Rocket Power that much to like get mad at this for ripping it off, but my main problem with it is just that it's just kind of dull and uninteresting. And then my main problem with Pixel Pinkie is not the fact that it's a Fairly Odd Parents ripoff, but rather it's everything about it is bad. Most of the episodes have dialogue in them that just comes off as being from out-of-touch corporate businessmen trying to appeal to the kids, trying to appeal to the current youth, and it is so fucking cringy to watch. Like, I know this was made in 2009, but like, still, it's just like, like, what the hell? It's some of the most how do you do fellow kids dialogue I've ever heard in my life.
That's the core juice bar. It's where anyone who's anyone hangs out after school.
Cool. We'll have to come back later. That's later. L8R.
Hey, you're getting into the text talk already.
There's an episode of the show where Nina and Annie get to hang out with Coolest Luke, and I know this was made in 2009. I know, like, you know, it was a different time, but like, you know, this kind of looks off now in retrospect. This has aged so f***ing badly now in recent times. Like, what does this look like to you, huh? What does it look like? I'm just gonna go ahead and play this one little clip, and I'm gonna ask, how does this clip make you feel? In today's day and age, how does this clip, how do you feel watching this clip, honestly? Ignore the fact that this was from 2009, just focus on it from the perspective of today. How does this make you feel?
You might want to get that. Coolest Luke?
Listen, I looked at your webzine and homepage and I just love it. Love it. You're exactly the kind of talent I could use. How would you like to spend a few days with me? Taking photos and just hanging out. Getting to know the real me. So you can design my website.
I'll just discuss it with my, associate. We're a very tight-knit pair. Be right back.
Yeah, the implications, the very unfortunate implications that this episode has today. Throughout the episode, Nina and Annie notice that Coolest Luke is kind of a spoiled bitch. And then there's one scene that is so f***ing disgusting that, like, I don't even think I can show it or even describe it, but, let's just say, you know that one guy at Nickelodeon who made like all those sitcoms, and he had like that a specific fascination with that one part of the human body, you know, like that guy, yeah, that is in it. And like, when you take into consideration, like, you think about like that nowadays, it's like, it's not even just Mr. DS or anything like that, it's not even just that, but it's just, there's just so many things that make that poorly aged. I really wish I could go into more detail about this, but like, I don't feel comfortable doing so. As a form of revenge, rather than calling the police, Nina and Annie decide to create a website exposing Coolest Luke for all the stuff that he had done. Being serious about this is just all the instances of him being a spoiled brat and not like any genuinely up stuff, of, you know. Coolest Luke confronts the girls about the website and admits that he's struggling with his fame, he's struggling with his pop star life, and he would rather be a normal boy, he would rather live a regular life, which is not an excuse at all. He apologizes in what is very clearly a fake apology, and Nina and Annie just decided to forgive him, and they decide to go to his concert anyways. And like, you frequently see him in a lot of the subsequent episodes, you see him mentioned. I get that this was made back in 2009, but like, Jesus, watching this today in 2024, it's very uncomfortable, to say the least. It makes you question, like, how the hell were they okay with this, really? On a serious note, looking past the unfortunate implications that this episode has, looking at it now, I usually don't really care all that much about, like, messages and morals and whatever in cartoons, but thinking about it with this, it made me realize that never meet your heroes is a lesson that I almost never see in any cartoon at all, and I feel like that's a really important lesson that kids should learn. And I'm so surprised that like there's barely any cartoons at all. There's like almost no cartoon I could think of that has that sort of message of, you know, never meet your heroes, anything of that sort. I would have been amazed if Pixel Pinkie of all cartoons would have this sort of message, you know, don't meet your heroes, don't idolize people, celebrities are not your friends, parasocial relationships are bad, you know, that sort of thing. I'm surprised there's not a lot of cartoons out there that have that message, and it would have been crazy if this was one of the only cartoons to have that message, but nope, they just go with a cheap cop-out, and they end up forgiving the person that they're idolizing. At the same time, though, I feel like I might be asking for just a little bit too much out of this extremely obscure, extremely crappy Australian Fairly Odd Parents ripoff from 2009. I have to wonder, is there anything good about this show? Is there anything good about it at all? Yeah. There's one vaguely good thing about it. There is one episode of the show that is actually somewhat kinda decent. It is the least bad episode out of the many episodes that I watched of the show, and if I ever do decide to just go for it and watch all 52 episodes of the show, God help my soul, this would very likely still be the least bad episode of the show. It's also the final episode of the show, just to make things even better. It really says a lot when the only semi-decent episode of the show is also the serious finale. In the final episode of the show, it's revealed that Nina only has a limited number of wishes left with Pixel Pinkie, and once she's used up all her wishes, Pixel Pinkie will have to move to another phone and leave Nina forever. For most of the episode, Nina tries her hardest to not wish for anything. However, she ends up failing at doing so, and this all culminates with a scene where the kids in her class start singing the wishing song, which is such a stupid thing that I can't help but find it kind of funny. It just comes off as like lazy bad writing, and in a way that kind of makes it funny. Sadly, there's nothing else like that in this show, this sort of like funny bad writing. Nina gets caught lip syncing to the song, and against her will she's forced to sing the song out loud in front of the class, and in a way it's actually a somewhat enjoyable funny scene. Not that enjoyable or funny, but compared to the rest of the show, it's definitely way more funny and enjoyable. That's for sure. By the end of the song, Nina only has one wish left, and so she decides to use it to see what's inside of her phone, to see what Pixel Pinkie's life is like inside the phone. And so the three of them transport into bootleg fairy world. An important detail to note with the show regarding the wishes is that eventually they wear off. Nina wishes for something and Pixel Pinkie grants it, and then like she can't undo the wish or anything of that sort. The wish has to wear off at a certain point in time. That's how it works. There's rare moments in the show where Pixel Pinkie has a rule book, which I guess could be akin to Doll Rules, but it doesn't really appear that often for me to say it's like a full-on ripoff. So if you want to count it as more proof that this show is a ripoff of the Fairly Odd Parents, then go ahead. I already feel like there's enough proof, but hey, more proof wouldn't hurt. Why not? And then my favorite thing about it is that the episode just ends abruptly. It ends with the wish wearing off and both Nina and Annie returning back to the real world, and that's it. It just rolls credits immediately after that. I swear to God, I did not edit this at all. This is actually how the episode ends. This is actually how this show ends.
Want me to teach you how to loop-de-loop? More than anything, Pixel Pinkie. Whoops, looks like you're out of here.
You know what? This might be an awful show, but like I can vaguely respect it. I could just ever so slightly respect it for having an actual serious finale. I genuinely thought they were going to do some cheap cop-out ending where it turns out, oh, never mind, Pixel Pinkie's going to stay with Nina forever. But like, no. The episode ends and like Nina doesn't have her anymore. She doesn't have Pixel Pinkie anymore. So You know what? I can give vague praise to the show for that, for actually having a serious finale. This is one of the very, very, very few cartoons on the Search for the Worst Cartoon to have an actual serious finale. Most of the cartoons that I look at, they either get canceled or they just end with no like actual conclusive finale. So for this to have a proper finale is kind of impressive, especially considering the fact that the real Fairly Odd Parents didn't have a proper finale either. As I said in the beginning of this segment, there were several instances where the show could have ended perfectly, like with Channel Chasers or Wishology, but it just kept going on. And then the last episode of the show, the serious finale of the Fairly Odd Parents, is just an ordinary 11-minute episode. There are so many instances in the Fairly Odd Parents where it's just this like cheap cop-out endings, where it's like, is Timmy gonna lose his fairy godparents? Are Cosmo and Wanda not gonna be with Timmy anymore? And like almost all the times, they end with, oh no, they get to stay with Timmy, never mind. So like, that's one thing this does that's better than the Fairly Odd Parents. I cannot believe I am giving a little bit of praise to this show, but I am. This is the only thing Pixel Pinkie has over the Fairly Odd Parents, and it might be the only thing that any of the not Nickelodeon collection cartoons have over the real Nicktoons that they're ripping off. But even then, though, that is obviously not enough to save this show from being one of the worst cartoons I have ever seen in my life. I really hate this show. I genuinely do. It is so f***ing bad, like you have no idea. It's crazy how we went from two shows that they're not good, but they're also not that bad either, to a show that's just genuinely awful to sit through, genuinely abhorrent. And yet despite this, despite how awful this show is, I couldn't help but sit through a lot of episodes of it. I sat through more episodes of this than I did for Coconut Fred or Wild Grinders, even though it is so much worse. And again, that's because I was just so astonished by how bad this show was. It's like a rare kind of offensively bad, where it's so offensively bad, I just want to keep watching it. I don't turn away from it. There's no limit where it's like I get like, okay, I don't want to watch this anymore. I'm sick of watching it. God, end the pain. It's just like I just keep watching it because I'm so fascinated by how awful it is. It truly is one of the worst cartoons ever made, easily. And so far, it is the worst cartoon that I think I've looked at on the Search for the Worst Cartoon. This could be subject to change at some point in the future, but please keep in mind that if I ever do decide to change it so that's like, okay, this isn't the worst cartoon I've seen on this series, this comes dangerously close. Like, this is like rock bottom, essentially. Very close to rock bottom, even if I decide that, okay, you know what, this isn't the worst one. This is probably gonna be like second or third worst. I don't know. What an awful f***ing show. Genuinely vile to sit through. And with all of that said, let us move on to the next not Nicktoon. After spending a large amount of time sitting through the nightmare that was Pixel Pinkie, I knew for a fact that no matter what, these final two shows couldn't be as bad or worse than Pixel Pinkie. I just simply refused to believe that such a thing could be the case. I'm not gonna spoil how Too Loud is just yet, but for Master Raindrop, well, let's talk about it. Master Raindrop is a cartoon that ran from 2008 to 2009 for only one season and 26 episodes. It is a ripoff of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and this is another Australian cartoon similar to Pixel Pinkie, which makes me question what is up with Australia and making crappy knockoffs of Nickelodeon shows. Does Nickelodeon not exist in Australia? Like, I don't get it. What's the deal? So the show includes 5 elements in it instead of 4. See guys, this is a totally different, totally unique show from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar: The Last Airbender only had 4 elements. This has 5. Water, wood, yes, wood, not wind or air or anything like that, wood, metal, fire, and earth. I'm gonna admit right here that I haven't watched Avatar The Last Airbender in forever, and I really need to rewatch it at some point, so if I get any details about Avatar wrong in this segment, then I greatly apologize, considering the fact that that live-action Netflix show came out very recently, and I've heard very mixed to negative things about it. I don't think I could have chosen a better time to cover this obscure Avatar ripoff. I really couldn't have chosen a better time. Compared to the previous 3 cartoons, this one's gonna be a bit harder for me to review, and the main reason for that is just because this show is f***ing boring in comparison. Pixel Pinkie is worse than this, but like at least there's stuff in it that I could talk about. This is just like boring. There's nothing for me to say about it at all. Aside from the show having a martial arts theme and also being about elements, I don't really think there's that many similarities to Avatar The Last Airbender, in that I don't think there's any specific stuff from Avatar The Last Airbender that's just ripped off and put into this, similar to Coconut Fred or Pixel Pinkie. It's obviously a ripoff, don't get me wrong, but I don't think there's any like specific episode plots or anything of that sort that's taken from Avatar and put into this show. I will say though that the show kinda reminds me of the Little Panda Fighter a lot, mainly because of its really bad animation. I feel like that might be a little harsh for me to say for this show because this is clearly some cheap, low-budget cartoon, but I cannot look at this and just not think of Little Panda Fighter. Something about the way the animation is, it really does remind me of the Little Panda Fighter. Some of the characters also have a really annoying voice as well, which seems to be a recurring thing in the Not Nickelodeon collection for some reason. Somehow Wild Grinders is the only one of these shows that doesn't have any sort of like annoying, obnoxious voice acting, which is weird to me. I already know for a fact that Too Loud will be annoying as hell to sit through. I mean, it's in the name, Too Loud. It's gonna be obnoxious to sit through, I bet. One of the main elements of the show is Metal, who's represented with this anthropomorphic golden monkey who I guess is intended to be the comedic relief of the show. He also has this unbelievably annoying voice. Like, just listen to it, man. Just listen to it.
Oh! Don't be such a bunch of potty poopers. These guys are dying to meet me. Jinho, Metal Element, take a bow if it makes you feel comfortable.
In general, though, a lot of the characters on the show just have really awful, annoying voices. It's crazy.
Naughty for you! You interrupted the sacred ceremony, destroyed the disc of harmony, and chipped one of my nails! Who are you?
Oh, I was like meditating in my favorite moon crater when this ball of chaos came like flying in. Next thing, I was making like a meteorite.
The moon! Then you must be Chang'e, the moon goddess!
Look at my home, it's burning up! Oh, too many bad vibes. I need to calm down.
So the plot of the show goes as follows. A long time ago, there was this golden dragon that brought peace and harmony to the world. There was this guy, the main villain of the show, that wanted to defeat the golden dragon in order to start his own evil empire. He brings down the dragon, however, it splits up into 5 separate elements: water, wind, wood, earth, and fire. The main villain guy, who I genuinely don't care what his name is, managed to get Fire, who is basically the Zuko of the show, I suppose. And he tries to stop the 4 remaining elements from reuniting and reviving the Golden Dragon. So in addition to this guy and bootleg Zuko, there's also this weird slug thing that's just included as well for some reason. He's basically meant to be the comedic relief of the villains, always screwing things up and being stupid and clumsy, and it's meant to be funny, and it's not very funny at all. Something that surprised me about this show is that this is another rare instance where a cartoon I cover on the Search for the Worst Cartoon actually has a serious finale. The show ends with the 5 elements coming together to become become the Golden Dragon. And yes, that does include bootleg Zuko over here. I feel it's worth noting that for a large majority of the show, bootleg Zuko is portrayed as a bad guy, one of the villains of the show. The theme song portrays him as being part of the main cast of elements, as in like he's with the other elements on their journey. And yet, it's not until the penultimate episode of the show where he switches sides and joins the elements. There's an episode early on into the show that hints that bootleg Zuko might join the good side. However, by the end of the episode, he decides against that. That's like, I believe, the 5th episode of the show. I don't know. Again, this lasted 26 episodes, and I didn't watch every episode. Listen, these are 26 episodes that are all around 23 to 24 minutes long. There's no way I'm going to sit through all of this. I'm sorry. I watched the first 5 consecutive episodes of the show, and then I skipped all the way to the penultimate episode because that was the episode where bootleg Zuko became a good guy, and then I watched the final episode of the show, and I felt like I missed nothing important at all. I felt like there were no important details from between episodes 6 to episode 24 that I was missing out on. So do what you will with that information. Compared to the previous 3 not Nicktoons, I don't even know if there's a lot for me to say about this show. There's something about it that's just kind of unappealing to me. I'm not sure what it is. Like, I cannot imagine anyone really enjoying this show. I watched the show on YouTube and I decided to scroll through the comments for one of the episodes, and I would see people talking about how they have like nostalgic childhood memories of this show, and it's like, I cannot imagine someone actually like watching this as a kid, let alone having nostalgic memories of it. I'm surprised it took me this long to make that realization, but like, yeah, there are people out there that have grown up with the shows that I've talked about on this series. Someone out there watched these shows initially when they were first airing. Not even just for the not Nickelodeon collection, but just for the Search for the Worst cartoon in general. Someone out there watched the Little Sam and Cat show when that was going on, and they have nostalgic memories of that. Someone out there watched the Nut Shack when that was airing all the way back in 2007. Most likely not a lot of people watched it, but I know for a fact that at least one person, one human being out there at some point in 2007 watched the Nut Shack on national television, and I'm not sure how to feel about that. Someone out there watched the Slim Shady show when that first came out, and they thought it was comedy gold. I myself am guilty of this. There are several cartoons that I've looked at in this series that I did indeed watch when I was a kid. Almost every cartoon that I've looked at on this series, someone has watched at some point, whether it be like a show from when they were a kid or not. It could be like an adult cartoon that they would watch. Like, someone watched Alan Gregory when it was airing back in 2011 on TV, stuff like that, and it just weirds me out, the idea of that. I don't know why. I can't even imagine like growing up with this. I'm sorry. I can't even imagine like someone out there grew up with Pixel Pinkie. Like, that's just hard for me to comprehend. I don't know why. There is at least one person out there in Australia that grew up in the late 2000s watching both Pixel Pinkie and Master Raindrop. At least one human being out there had these 2 shows as their favorite cartoons growing up as a kid. I don't know how to feel about that. I really don't know at all. But going back to what I was saying, there's just something really unappealing about this show. I'm not sure there's that much for me to say about this when compared to like Coconut Fred or whatever, but like that's just the one way for me to describe this show. It's just kind of unappealing to me. I guess it's just the bad CGI that affects it, the bad animation. This really does remind me of the Little Panda Fighter, but it's not like funny bad like Little Panda Fighter. It's just kind of, again, unappealing. You know what? I just realized something. In addition to the little panda fighter, this show also reminds me of that really weird, really obscure Cartoon Network show with those kung fu chickens. Chop Socky Chooks. I'm not sure how many of y'all are gonna remember this show. I have basically no memories of this show. I don't even know if I watched this as a kid. But yeah, this was a real show that existed. This wasn't some weird fever dream that you had. And yeah, Master Raindrop really does remind me of this show, I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how I could be able to go into further detail about this, but there is something about this show that I just do not vibe with. There's something about this show that it just does not sit right with me. I get that this is a show that's intended for a young demographic. In fact, I think out of the 4 cartoons that I've looked at so far, this is the one that's like the most obviously intended for a younger demographic. I get that even though this is a ripoff of Avatar, it's obviously not gonna have the same like themes and whatever that Avatar has. Unlike the other cartoons, this one is a bit different in that like watching this show, I sometimes forget, oh yeah, this is meant to be an Avatar ripoff. I guess that could just be because there's not really much similarities between this and Avatar. There are still similarities, and there are enough similarities for me to call it a ripoff. But yeah, there were moments in this show where I'm just watching it and like, yeah, it's garbage, but I forget often that this is meant to be a ripoff of Avatar. Maybe if I like rewatched Avatar and like it was still fresh in my head, then I would probably go into more detail. There'd probably be a lot more similarities between both shows than I initially thought. I'm not sure. There isn't really a whole lot for me to say about this show. It's just kind of boring, and there's just something about it that's just not appealing to me at all. I'm not sure if I want to call this offensively bad necessarily, but this is definitely one of the worst cartoons I've looked at for sure. The show itself is just generally not very funny, entertaining, nothing like that. The green slug, as I said, is meant to be the comedic relief, and well, he's not very funny. As a matter of fact, I'm just gonna say this, I feel like a large part of the unappealing nature of this show just comes from this slug character. I'm not sure what it is. You might think it's stupid for me to say that like this show is bad because I don't like one character, but that's just kind of how I feel. Something about this character, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the character design, maybe it's the bootleg Patrick Star voice that he has.
That was the worst pork bun I've ever eaten. Oops. And you look really stupid in that armor. Sorry. And you've got this big body and tiny little head.
I don't know what it is, but like I feel like this character greatly contributes to the generally unappealing nature of this show. I don't like Master Raindrop very much. I don't think it's a very good show. I think it's boring, uninteresting, not very funny, not entertaining, and yeah, it's just generally unappealing, and I really don't like it. So with all of that said, let us move on to the 5th and thankfully final cartoon in the Not Nickelodeon collection. Of course, it's a ripoff of The Loud House. Just perfect, really. Just absolutely perfect. What else would it be? Seriously. After suffering through 4 different Nickelodeon ripoffs of varying quality, none of them good at all, our journey across the Not Nickelodeon collection comes to a pleasantly brief but ultimately underwhelming end with Too Loud, a 2017 cartoon that allegedly rips off The Loud House. And I say allegedly because, to be honest, this show has almost nothing in common with The Loud House at all. This is going to be a very brief segment when compared to the first 4 cartoons. I understand that's going to be disappointing, but that's just kind of how it has to be, really. The show follows 2 kids named Jeffrey and Sarah who help out in a library. The only problem, though, is that they're, well, too loud. They have huge heads, and I guess that causes them to be extraordinarily loud. This honestly doesn't really feel like a Loud House ripoff all that much. Only 16 episodes were made, with all of the episodes being extremely short. The longest episode is only 5 minutes and 58 seconds long. So you know what? This was a breeze to get through. This was a much needed breath of fresh air after sitting through the previous 4 shows. So let's see what makes this a rip-off of The Loud House. For one thing, the show has the word loud in its title, and for another thing, one of the 2 main characters, Jeffrey, bears a slight resemblance to Lincoln Loud. And by slight resemblance, I mean he has a round head and white hair just like Lincoln, and that's basically where the similarities end between the 2 shows. Looking at this character a lot more, he doesn't even really look like Lincoln all that much. I mean, yeah, he has a round head and he has white hair, but like that's kind of it really. He barely looks like Lincoln aside from that. If anything, he looks more like a hybrid between Timmy Turner and Flapjack rather than Lincoln. Some of you might be asking me, why am I including this as part of the main not Nickelodeon collection instead of including it as an honorable mention at the very beginning of the video? Well, you see, the main reason is, even though this isn't really much of a Loud House ripoff, I still don't think it's a very good show. I mean, it's relatively harmless as far as the cartoons that I've looked at on this series go. You can sit down and watch this show and not question your entire existence while watching it, which is more than I could say for Pixel Pinkie, but the show itself is still not that good. I would have thought that this show would have just been, oh, it's funny because the main characters are loud and annoying, but like, there wasn't really that much of that in this show, surprisingly. I mean, it is there, don't get me wrong, but like, it's not as bad as I would have expected it to be. I would have thought that this would be an extremely insufferable show, but it's surprisingly tame when it comes to its obnoxiousness. I thought this would be something that would give me a headache, and it didn't really give me that. I think this is like similar to Slippin' Jimmy, where I would hate this more if it was like a long, like proper cartoon basically. Cause Slippin' Jimmy is like the same thing as this. Only 6 episodes long, and they're all really short, so it's like there's not really much of a point in complaining about how bad the show is, because it goes by like a breeze basically. You start watching the show and then with a blink of an eye you finish watching it just like that. If this had more episodes, or if the episodes were longer, then I would probably hate this a lot more, but as it stands, this is just relatively harmless. I still don't think it's good because it's not very funny. I did say that like the loud, obnoxious humor in the show is not as bad as I would have expected it to be. That doesn't mean that it's good. Something interesting that I found out about was that this is a cartoon from DreamWorks. Yes, DreamWorks, as in Shrek, Megamind, Madagascar, How to Train Your Dragon, Kung Fu Panda, that DreamWorks. I mean, it's more specifically their television branch rather than like DreamWorks Animation themselves, but like it's still DreamWorks nonetheless. Something interesting that I also found out about this show is that a certain someone worked on this show. The first entry into our Too Loud crew spotlight at VivzyPop, Too Loud's character designer and animator. Hashtag Too Loud Cartoon. My, this VivzyPop person seems like a real interesting person. Let's find out more about her, shall we? Vivian Medrano. Job title on Too Loud. Character designer and animator. Likes musicals, villains, animals, country music, mythology and folklore, karaoke. Dislikes ukuleles, bacon, the too cool for you girl trope, monkeys, mouth smacking sounds. Top 5 favorite cartoons: BoJack Horseman, Billy and Mandy, El Tigre, Batman the Animated Series, and American Dad. What else are you working on? Creating and producing my own original animated show called Has Been Hotel. Oh wow, I wonder how that turned out. I'm sure this Has Been Hotel show that she's working on, I'm sure it'll turn out good. I'm sure it totally won't turn out to be a highly controversial cartoon that will likely spawn an equally controversial search for the worst cartoon. No way. There's no way that'll ever happen. While we're at it, I just realized something. This is a DreamWorks cartoon that's on Peacock. Now, I could be very wrong on this, but I think there was another DreamWorks cartoon that came out on Peacock very, very, very recently. I believe it was based on one of DreamWorks' movies. Let's see, Shrek, no. B-Movie, no. Madagascar, no. Over the Hedge, nah. I'm not sure which movie it was based on, but I know there was a cartoon based on a DreamWorks movie that came out on Peacock recently, and I wonder how that show turned out. I'm sure it turned out great. I'm sure it totally pays respect to the original movie that the show is based on, especially if the original movie that the show is based on wasn't a hugely popular DreamWorks movie when it first came out. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I do believe that this TV show also had a pilot movie that served as a sequel to that movie that the show is based on. A movie that is totally not inferior in any way to the original film in terms of its quality, and it doesn't retcon any of the important details that were in the original movie. I'm sure that's not the case at all. All of a sudden, this Too Loud cartoon just got a whole lot more interesting, if I do say so myself. On a serious note, it is absolutely f***ing insane how this is somehow connected to not one, but two highly controversial cartoons that would come out in 2024. Wow. What are the odds, man? What are the odds? This is not a Loud House ripoff at all. I don't know why I see people say that like this rips off the Loud House when it's like there's only two similarities and that's it. I think with this it's like it's just a really unfortunate coincidence more than anything else. Coconut Fred, Pixel Pinkie, and Master Raindrop are for sure ripoffs of their respective Nicktoons, but Wild Grinders and this they're more coincidences than anything else. This is just a very unfortunate coincidence, seeing how, remember, this came out in 2017. This came out only a year after The Loud House. I'm only putting this into the main not Nickelodeon collection, and I'm not including it as like an honorable mention or whatever, because I just wanted to talk about it more. I didn't want to just briefly talk about it at the beginning and then never acknowledge it again. I would rather go into further detail on it and make a full-fledged review of it. Unfortunately though, that is near damn impossible to do, considering the fact that the show doesn't really give me enough material to work with. It's not good at all, but like, it's not terrible either. It's just mediocre, basically. It's better than The Loud House. There you go, I said it. This is better than The Loud House. Is it really a rip-off if it's better than the thing it's ripping off? I mean, this isn't even much of a rip-off of The Loud House. There's like almost nothing in common with it at all, and the very few similarities that it has are just mostly coincidences and nothing else. But if you do want to classify this as a Loud House rip-off, then like, it's definitely better than the show that it's ripping off, I'll tell you that much. And with all that said, we have finally finished the Not Nickelodeon collection. So allow me to go over my final thoughts on each of these shows. This is easily the longest search for the worst cartoon that I have made thus far. I first started work on this video in January, and this video is coming out in mid-March. I spent around 2 months working on this video. This was a video that I had been wanting to make for a very long time, and I'm honestly happy that it's finally seeing the light of day. I must say though, between how long it took for me to make this video and the really awful quality of most of these shows, I am most likely never going to do another one of these giant search for the worst cartoon episodes again, where I look at numerous different shows in one giant video. No thanks, I'm good. I could make a not Cartoon Network collection video, but for better or worse, I don't think there's really a lot of material for that to work. I know there's that Chinese Gumball ripoff, but like, that's kind of it, really. Most likely, I would rather do that as its own separate episode and not have it be part of a giant search for the worst cartoon covering multiple different cartoons. There's barely anything when it comes to Cartoon Network ripoffs, so most likely this is not gonna get like a follow-up of any sort. We'll see. Only time will tell, really. We'll see how things will turn out. If I were to rank these 5 shows from least bad to worse, this would be my ranking. Coconut Fred's Fruit Salad Island is easily the best of the 5 not Nicktoons, and there's like almost no competition at all, except for Too Loud, which comes at a very close second place. Following that, you have Wild Grinders, which is not as tolerable as Coconut Fred or Too Loud, but it's also not offensively terrible either. It's just in the middle, essentially. And then following that, you have Master Raindrop, which is really bad. And then at the very bottom of both the Not Nickelodeon Collection ranking list and the Search for the Worst Cartoon ranking list, you have Pixel Pinkie, which is Pixel Pinkie. That's all that needs to be said about it. It's Pixel Pinkie. Of course it's at the very bottom. What did you expect? I don't recommend any of these shows at all. None of these shows are funny bad. Coconut Fred and Too Loud are pretty tolerable as far as bad cartoons go, but they're definitely not good at all. They're not ironically enjoyable, nor are they legitimately good. Master Raindrop is awful, and Pixel Pinkie is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm just really happy at the fact that this video is finally over, because my god, you have no idea how long it took for me to make this video. And what are the odds that while I'm making this extremely huge search for the worst cartoon, the biggest search for the worst cartoon that I have made thus far, easily, 2 highly controversial cartoons would come out that are just begging to be reviewed by me. And as much as I would have loved to put this video on hold and look at these 2 shows while they were still fresh, I knew that I couldn't do that no matter what. I knew that I had to prioritize this video. I could not make any more Search for the Worst Cartoons until I was finished with the Not Nickelodeon Collection Search for the Worst Cartoon. And after all this time, I am finally done with the Not Nickelodeon Collection Search for the Worst Cartoon. Was it worth it? Maybe. I don't know. But regardless though, making this entire video was an experience. Sitting through all of these shows, it was an experience. An experience that, for better or worse, I will never forget about. Ever. Anyways, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, and if you're new to the channel, maybe consider subscribing, as it would be very greatly appreciated. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and I will see you all next time. Adios.